that don't know me, I'm Jay Bayani. I'm Managing Director here at Bayani HR and Employment Law. And we work with lots of charities and not-for-profit organisations. And we thought it would be really good to start doing some knowledge sessions and, for us to share our experiences and learn from each other. So today's session is about trustees because that's the hot topic at the moment. We're getting lots of questions around growing your trustee board, diversifying your board, etc. So, right. So first, for those that don't know the firm, and we do work with lots of you who are on today, but for those that don't know us, we're an SRA regulated law firm, and without sort of going into too much detail about what we do, this sort of graphic is a good one for you to have a look at perhaps later. We'll send the slides to you if you want them. So these are the sorts of areas where we think, the key areas around working with the sector are, and in particular our sweet spot, which is all to do with employing and managing people. Have a look at that because that's a good sort of aid memoir for you, thinking, have we got this in place? Have we got that in place? Okay, so so the agenda for today is going to be looking at how you identify your trustee skills and diversity gaps, which is essential. We'll have a look at how you find and successfully recruit trustees to your board. We'll look at how you get the best out of your trustees and how you remove a trustee, which is also something that's quite topical, which actually was one of the things that prompted putting this session on for you. So I did mean to say also that if you've got questions, because we haven't got an awful lot of time, just put them in the chat and we'll pick them up afterwards, and hopefully there'll be time to cover as much as we can. So the definition of a trustee. Well, most people know that a trustee it's a privileged position to hold, but it's also one that comes with a lot of responsibility, doesn't it? Because you're responsible as trustees for governing the charity, and those of you that are working in executive office roles within a charity, you obviously need to understand what the role of your trustees is and where the sort of lines are in terms of decision making and involvement. And I'm sure many of you will have heard the phrase "nose in, fingers out" when it comes to trustees. Unfortunately, a lot of the charities that I've worked with over the years are very much fingers in, hands in, full feet in, and actually do far too much, have too much involvement, and sometimes that can cause some real friction with the executive officers. And that's something we often work with our clients on, is looking at some facilitated training so that people understand what their remit is. But it's a responsible position. These are the sort of key responsibilities that any trustee should be informed about, because sometimes depends what sort of organisation you've got. Some organisations are quite sophisticated and they have some really slick processes. So public sector organisations, I've sat as a governor on a college and school boards. I've sat on local economy boards and Chamber of Commerce, but I've also been involved in smaller charities where there isn't that sort of process in place, and that's one of the things I want to bring out really today. So sometimes the trustees don't even know what they're letting themselves in for, and I think that it's really important that they are aware that they've got responsibilities for these areas, which again I won't go through because through all of them because of the time constraints. But essentially the charity has to carry out its objectives, and the trustees are responsible for making sure that happens. And they carry the book. at the end of the day. So, I think the role for me, the role of the trustee board is to be a critical friend, a sounding board, to have an overview of what's going on, but not to be doing the day-to-day decision making. And we are seeing a lot of that where charity trustees are making too many decisions, and sometimes that's at the expense of the actual executives working in the organisation and the chief executive. You end up with conflicts. So first of all, can you recognise any immediate gaps in your board? So whether you've got an existing board and you're here because you're thinking about the strength of your board or the makeup of your board, or whether you're in an early stage or you're looking for new charity trustees because you've had people that have retired from your board, or you just really need a bigger and stronger board. But the first thing to do is to do a skills gap audit, and I'd really recommend that you do that and give some thought to that, because sometimes what happens is that charities take on trustees because they'll say, "Oh, we're looking for new trustees." Somebody will show interest, and it'll be somebody who is connected to the charity in some way, and hey presto, they become a trustee. But I think that you should be giving a lot more constructive thought to who you actually want on the board and why do you want them. Is it because they represent a group that you particularly want to connect with? Is it because they have particular skills in, for example, what we do in HR employment law? I get asked all the time to sit on boards where charities have got a gap in that knowledge. Finance, anyone that deals with finance will be approached all the time. Is it a community? Is it a community-led charity? And so you've got somebody just coming from the community. But I think you need to, first of all, identify what the skills gaps are. And Shida will talk to us shortly about your sort of diversity gaps as well, and why that's important. Okay, so some of the things to think about is how you're going to recruit your trustees. And I think first thing is, being open in communicating what you're looking for. So in the same way as you would go through a recruitment process, where you would have, plenty of detail about what that job role looks like. You might have a person specification, or you should have a person specification. So it's not just about we need this job fulfilling and the person needs to do X, Y, and Z. The person specification explains what sort of person you want to fulfill that role. And I think approaching trustee recruitment in the same way is a really good idea, because everybody's then clear at the beginning what your expectations are, and what you're looking for. Sharing the expectations of the role and responsibility, so considering any potential barriers, so how you communicate that. So in the same way as in a recruitment process, if you are communicating it in a way where some people aren't going to get access to it because I think one of the things that we're coming across more is neurodiversity. So some people don't feel comfortable with having to fill out an application form or even a written communication of what the job role entails. And I think that there are more creative ways that you can do that. So you can create a video about what sort of trustees you're looking for, or indeed what sort of staff you're looking for. You can make it accessible. You can engage with potential trustees and say, do you need this communicating in any different ways? And it's not these days just about like it used to be in the old days, about braille or hearing issues. It's very much about the way the brain works and how people access information, and you are expected as a charity to make adjustments to the way in which you communicate with potential candidates. Showcase who you are as an organisation. So I have a real passion about this, because I think that we work with some amazing organisations, but they don't really shout about what they do. And what happens is that you get people joining all sorts of trustee boards because they're already a well-recognised brand, and your charity might not be, and so you might be missing out on some really great candidates. So I think, in the same way, we work with clients on things like brand and values to make an employer of choice. You can do the same, with your intention to get the best trustee. And if you do that really well, then you'll attract really, really good caliber of trustees. So doing some preparation work perhaps before you start a recruitment drive is something that you can think about. So what does your website say about you? What does your socials, your social media say about you? What kind of literature have you got that you can send to somebody who might be interested? Okay, yeah, consider where you're advertising. The role is key as well. So there's no point advertising in national in some sort of national publications where you really need local trustees and community. So if you're running a community charity, then making sure that you know what publications go out into the community. So we often do that. We'll investigate what things are going out, what online communications there are, publications there are where you can advertise so that you put yourself in the best position to get the candidates that you want. Having a candidate pack, it just looks really impressive if you've got that. Even for trustees, I think it looks really good if you've got if you can approach potential trustees and say, look, this is how we do things. This is what we're looking for. This is what we expect of you. It makes particularly those career trustees that have really got the time to dedicate to your charity, which is what you want. They'll be quite seasoned. Some of these will have sat on loads of boards, and I think they'll be impressed if you have a pack. They think, right, this is an organisation I want to get involved in because they're going to be done properly. It's not going to be ad hoc meetings, and no, I won't be adding any value. So, and then understanding what you want, as I say, the gaps and skills, experience, and background starting point. Okay, so then getting the best out of your trustees. So as an employment lawyer, obviously these are the things that I look at all the time and have done for many, many, many years around employees. And although, of course, there's a distinction and your trustees are not employees, the same principles apply, don't they? Because you want to make sure you've got a trustee board that is aligned with your values and behaviours. So first of all, thinking about what your values and behavioural expectations are is where you start, but then communicating that to trustees. And when you're recruiting or when you're thinking about whether your current trustee board is right, is working for you, you can measure their effectiveness against values. And there's no reason why you can't do that just because they're trustees, not employees. And then some of the obvious things, making sure trustees need to know about governance and about legal issues. They need to know about HR and employment law because it's such a key component of a charity and the success and failure of a charity often. They need to know about safeguarding if it's a charity where that's particularly relevant. And putting trustees through some trustee training, I think is really essential. And we do that. Lots of other organisations do. I'll tell you a little bit about ours at the end. So it's sort of this is a very, very mini version of what you get in a more detailed facilitated trustee training. But I would really think about that if at all. So, what sort of things are you looking for to enhance the effectiveness of your board? So I thought some of these things are good. So if you try and recruit two trustees at the same time and induct them together, it's a good idea because they're on the same journey then. And I know that I've sat on some boards where I felt really quite lonely because it's felt as though everybody else knows what's going on and what the culture of this organisation is and what's expected. And it's taken me, some time to really add some value to them. Whereas if you've got other people that are recruited around the same time, you can go on that journey together, which I think is really quite helpful. Provide a full induction and full training. So, of course, these things take time, but I think it's worth the investment in time to do that. So, set some time aside, think about what you want to communicate to trustees, how you want to set expectations right from the beginning. Hold an away day, team bonding day for your board and senior leadership team, where you can do soft stuff, but you could also do some trustee training. I think that's valuable. Encourage questions of all shapes and sizes, and the reason we sort of say that is, some charity boards honestly don't encourage questions, and they actually like it's sort of, this is how we've always done things. I think you have to watch for that and think, well, actually, if we're going to do the best for our charity or our organisation, we need to make sure that people are asking questions and pushing, and sometimes there'll be uncomfortable questions like, why has this always been done like this? And the best boards, I think, thrive on that and actually encourage that. Holding regular one-to-one review meetings with the chair. Now, I've never sat on a board, I have to say, where I've had that. And I think sometimes people assume that if you're a professional, if you're a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, in particular, that you don't need that. But of course you do, because, I don't know, I don't necessarily know anything about the organisation I'm going into. So say, for example, when I sat as a governor at Sheffield College, for me, it was a whole new world. I had kids who were college age, and so I had some interest in it, but I didn't have a clue about the education sector. And actually, that perhaps looking back, it would have been really helpful to have more one-to-ones with the chair and to be able to say, look, do you think I'm doing okay? What do you want from me? Create opportunities for your board to immerse themselves in the organisation. So again, using the college as an example, what did work really well was that they had open days, they had college sessions where they'd have some showcase or something, and they'd really encourage governors to attend that. Whereas I've been on some charity boards where I really have never got under the skin of it, and found out what they really do day to day. Okay. The other thing I think, just to say, that I've found really valuable is, as a trustee, if you are held accountable. So what you have is you have some trustees who tick a box and they come along because they're being released by their employer to come, or they want to build their CV, but they don't actually contribute very much. And a good way to make sure that people are contributing, I found it very scary at first, and it was when I was sort of younger as well. I sat on a board, the most effective board I've sat on, and the chair was a very practiced chair, but also a businessman. And what he did was, every month it was every 2 months we used to have meetings, but we had to actually complete a form saying what we've been doing leading up to the meeting. And it was the best way to make you think, right, what have I contributed, or what have I not done, or what can I do next time, or what do I need from the charity to enable me to do more. So I would definitely think about devising some sort of system whereby you can hold your trustees accountable, but also that you're highlighting the things that they that you want from them. Okay, so then next one is, what if you want to step down? So if you're a trustee, and I've had this over the years, I've had a number of occasions where a trustee will say, can I speak to you in confidence? I just can't be involved anymore. I'm concerned that I'm not giving enough time, or I don't feel I'm aligned with where this charity is. And people think that it's a forever job. Some trustees think it's a forever job. And sometimes if you haven't got enough critical mass, then you get trustees who feel that they have no option because they're so invested in it. So, talking to the chair is obviously the first thing that you would do. And I think just talking through the issues, maybe it's a time commitment issue, maybe it's a values issue, maybe it's you could find that you've got a valuable trustee who actually doesn't want to step down. It's just that there are some things that need to be sort of smoothed over. But or you as somebody wanting to step down, you might feel, well, actually, no, I don't really want to do that. I just want something a bit different. But if you do decide, you've had your time there and you want to leave, then you can. Well, first of all, you need to check your governing documents because there may be a procedure set out. A lot of the charities we've dealt with, there is no procedure for down as a trustee or no formal process. And all you need to do is submit a letter of resignation. In the same way as being employed in an organisation, it's good to try and aim to give as much notice as you can, and perhaps help with the recruitment of any replacement fees. So stepping down yourself as a trustee is really not with complication. What we are finding is that where a chief executive or chair of trustees will come to us and say, we want to remove a trustee or more than one trustee sometimes. How do you do that? And that is trickier. So I'm going to bring Lindsay, who heads up our legal services and is a director at Downey Law. She's been dealing with some of these sorts of cases, and she'll just give you the benefit of her wisdom on that. So, Lindsay, if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Actually, we've just had a question that kind of covers or skirts around this issue about what happens when a trustee basically is a bit surplus to requirements, their skills are no longer needed. And I think the key question when it comes to looking at removing a trustee is, well, why? Why are we removing them? What is the reason? If it is the skills issue of someone who's just not contributing, this is why I think it's really important to do the skills gap exercise. It should be a group exercise. The board should agree what skills are needed for the charity, and I think if that's done regularly as well, so it needs to be updated. It can start to highlight then where the gaps are, but also the people that don't fill any gap at all. And that opens the door then to have those constructive conversations. Obviously, you can get people that are stubborn and think, no, I don't want to go anywhere. So it is about being sensitive and thinking, what is the best way forward here? But if you've got good relationships with your trustees and your trustees all have the charity's best aims in mind, then hopefully they will recognise when they're not contributing and they need to make room for someone who is. So, as I said, back to the key question of why we're removing them. So, one of the things that tends to happen is that trustees are only appointed for a set period. So, in those circumstances, it's quite straightforward. We're looking at your governing documentation, which will say, for example, a trustee will only serve a 3-year term. There might be chance for them to be reappointed or re-elected, but that is obviously a much simpler process if they just get to the end of that period that they were first assigned. It becomes obviously more tricky though when we've got trustees that aren't behaving. There might be breaches. They might not be attending a minimum number of meetings that they're required to attend. You might have had a complaint about a trustee as well, which can sometimes arise. And I would say the first way to deal with this is not so much informally, it's about trying to be fair and trying to keep the whole situation amicable. One of the key considerations a lot of charities have is PR when it comes to removing trustees, having complaints. We've got to be mindful about how we deal with this, because what we don't want to do in the process of removing a trustee is completely undermine the charity's aims. If you're a charity that promotes inclusion, diversity, and we're removing trustees because there's been a complaint against them for, say, discrimination, it has to be handled very sensitively because you can do damage to your charity. So So why we're removing them, if it is a complaint issue, if it is failure to attend board meetings, I think that's when your chair does need to be stepping up, keeping an eye on these situations, having the conversations with the trustees. If there are regular one-to-ones that are happening, perfect time to say, don't really feel that you're doing enough, or you're not meeting your minimum obligations. Keeping everything in writing, we always recommend, so that you've got your paper trail. But also making sure that you treat everyone fairly. So you can't pick out one person and say, well, you've missed 3 meetings when you know that other people have missed 4. Everyone must be treated the same. So if you are going to pick up these points with trustees, like I said, everyone needs to have the same. For example, if it's a letter, they need to receive the same letter. So again, you are not picking anyone out. Other things that I think can be helpful, as what Jay's mentioned, is, have you tried, if it's a dispute between 2 trustees, are we to the point where we need to remove one, or have we tried other things? Have we tried maybe mediation, team building exercises, get your trustees involved in those, ways that you can bring your board together, because you want everyone working as a team. So we do need to look at all those possibilities first before we jump to, right, no, we just want to get rid of them. If we're certain at this point that the trustee either doesn't want to go on their own, they're not taking the hint, they're adamant that they want to stay, but the rest of the board, particularly and the chair, feel that they are not a suitable person to be there, then the first place we need to look is your governing documents. The governing documents that are drafted well will have a removal procedure in. So one of the things I'm going to urge you to do after today is go check. And if they are not in there, it might be that you want to start looking at updating those, so that you've got options for if these situations arise. I always say in employment law, the phrase that always kind of gives me tingles and think, oh, is when they say, oh, we don't have those issues because we're like a family. Well, families fall out a lot. So that I never buy that as an excuse. I still think you need something written in there. So we look at your governing documents. What's your process in there for removal? Is there a vote of no confidence clause? Because that can be really helpful. If it is in there, a vote of no confidence done correctly in accordance with your procedure will be a binding decision amongst your board. So that is one of the first things that we would look to do. Certainly one of the easiest way to remove a trustee, provided, as I said, it's all written down in your governing document. If it is not in there, you can still host a vote of no confidence, but it is not binding. What it would be to do then would be to encourage that person to then resign. So it would be saying, look, the board doesn't have faith in you. Please, can you step down? So that would be the next step if you don't have the other removal processes. After that, if we still do have a trustee that is not budging, it does become more complicated. And we need to be very careful at this point, because we're then relying on the provisions within the Trustee Act. So I think it's section 36. Get some proper legal advice at this stage, because if it's got to this point, it is going to become tricky, and we need to make sure we're doing everything properly. So whilst I'd love to take you through Trustee Act, charity law, actually at that point, it all depends on exactly what that trustee's done and whether we can fit it into the legislation then to remove them. The other thing I haven't commented on today, though, is I'm assuming that we are just talking at this stage about trustees. I am aware, though, that charities have different setups. If you've got trustees that are also directors, we need to be following different processes to remove them as directors of the company itself. So that is a different issue. So again, make sure that you know what your legal setup is and how many positions someone needs to be removed from. And your governing documents, again, can be really a helpful starting point. Company, they will have their own removal procedures. So, and then finally, once we have looked at, we're either in the process of removing someone or we have removed a trustee, think about the practical steps involved. So handovers, do they have any special duties? Do they have logins, for example, for the Charity Commission? Are they in charge of your accounts or your finances? Do we need to remove them as signatories from any accounts? And again, managing that PR perspective sensitively. What is your message that's going to go out if this is going to be quite a public a public change to your board? You don't want your charity to look unstable, particularly to funders. So yeah, putting thought into that prior to making any rash decisions, I think, is really important. Also, property and lease deeds. Normally trustees are the named person on those. So if the trustees are named on your property deeds, your leases, again, you need to put in steps to make sure that those are all moved over. So I appreciate it's a whistle-stop tour of removing, hopefully giving you some ideas of at least where to start with that. But if in doubt, seek some proper help, because you don't want to be in breach of any of the rules when it comes to trustees. Now, I really would like, well, I'm really excited to introduce you to Shahida, who's from Faith Star. So Shahida is going to talk to you about creating a diverse board. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on today, Shahida, to speak with us. Just make sure you have unmuted yourself, and I will pass over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everybody. Really excited to be here. Thank you to Jay and the team for inviting me to come and talk to you all about how to think about more diversity within trustees and boards. So can we just go to the next slide or the next click? That should have it all on there. That's it. So brilliant. Thank you, Lindsay. So I just want to start off by saying, when we talk about diversity on boards or diversity within trustees, it's normally a question that arises for not-for-profit organisations within context of something's triggered it. So quite often it will be because the whole question of EDI has come up, equality, diversity, inclusion has come up for the organisation. Sometimes it could be in a much wider cultural context. So, for example, during COVID, we had the Black Lives Matter movement, we had the death of George Floyd, we had the Kevin Fenton report onto the disproportionate deaths within Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. Even locally within Sheffield and South Yorkshire, we've had the Race Commission. So there's a whole host of reasons why the question of EDI might come up for your board. The one thing I would say, and I'd encourage you as charities to do, is go on a journey. So before you dive straight into, oh, we want to diversify our board, the question I would say to you, the question you really need to ask is why? Why are we doing this, and why are we doing it right now? Because quite often charities will jump into the EDI question because they might look at their board and go, oh, we don't really reflect our communities here, or we don't actually reflect the people that we're serving in terms of our beneficiaries, or actually we need to be more diverse because of. So the question I would always say when you're talking about diversifying your board, ask yourselves why, first of all. Why are we doing this? Because that will define the journey that you're going on. And it's really important because the people that you then bring on as trustees, how you define that question will also define how you treat those trustees, particularly trustees that you are bringing on to diversify your board. And that could be around race, class, health, disability, gender. It doesn't matter what it is. If you are trying to diversify your board, ask yourself the question, why first. Once you've asked yourself the question why, and you really understand that, what's the purpose of diversifying your board? Why should we bother? So that question becomes really paramount, actually. So in terms of why should we bother? Well, for a whole host of reasons, because it's the right thing to do. Quite often, society, communities, the work that we're trying to do requires us to kind of think about, well, actually the service provision or the activity or the charitable aims that we're delivering as a charity, do they meet the needs of all of the communities that we're trying to serve? And if they don't, why don't they? And so therefore, having a diverse board brings together a whole range of different things that you might need as a charity to help you fulfill your charitable aim. So it could be, for example, bringing on a diverse board that has a skill set that you didn't have on your board. It might be a trustee that's got tremendous networks that you didn't have before. It could be a trustee that comes from a diverse background that's got real insight into culture or religion or race or ethnicity, about particular sets of communities that you might not have had before. So it's about really thinking, what's the added value of diversifying our board? What does it bring to the charity? But I want to caveat that with, what then do we as a charity provide to that trustee? And so some of the work that we do with governance boards, some of the work that we do with trustee boards, is we help trustees and boards think about the infrastructure around trustees. So it's not just about, well, you know, let's diversify our board, let's get a Black person, a woman, a disabled person, and oh, by the way, if they can be LGBTQI+, that's even better. So that's all fine. You can grab these trustees that tick all these boxes for you. But the question then is, all right, you've done an induction with them about your charity, but then what's the support mechanism you've put in place around those trustees? Because you are asking people to come into a space to bring a set of skills or knowledge or lived experience to add value to you. What value are you adding to them? So we will always encourage boards to think about the support mechanisms around trustees. So that's, for example, ensuring if we bring trustees on board around the issue of race and ethnicity, for example, are we putting in place support mechanisms for them where they're not being traumatized? And what I mean by trauma is that they're not having to constantly face, you know, if we're tackling issues around racism, discrimination, structural inequalities, that type of stuff, we're not putting the pressure solely on that one trustee because they happen to be the person of color on our board. Actually, everybody around that board needs to understand what those issues are, and do we really understand what those issues are? So it can't just be a tick box exercise. So coming on to kind of how do we create a diverse board, it's really, we get asked this question all the time. Shahida, we need to diversify our board. Do you know of anybody? And I'm like, well, hang fire, you need to go on the journey, and actually you will find those people. But you've got to offer them something. Why would anybody want to come and sit on your board unless you can show them that there's some, not just added value to you and to them, but that actually you've thought about the whole question of EDI in terms of what it means to you as a charity. So why are you doing it? What's the purpose? What's the shared values on it? What does it do for your beneficiaries? Because within the context of social justice, a lot of people, you know, it's their hearts and minds that you have to win as a trustee. They will, if their values align with yours as a charity, they're more likely to want to be a trustee for you. But you have to do your homework. If you are not already a diverse board, thinking about how you can become more diverse requires you to go on a journey. It cannot just be a tick box. It cannot just be tokenistic. People will see straight through that and they will be turned off by that. So it's really important to think about that. How do we maintain a diverse board? Again, that's a really important question. It's, have we put in place measures that will enable our trustees to be able to constructively challenge other members on our board, for example? So if, you know, and do we as a board give each other permission to ask ourselves those difficult questions? So sometimes, I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I was a trustee on a board. There was a very, this was an older trustee. I was probably the first person of colour that they'd ever come into contact with. And they had lots of questions, but they were kind of very reluctant to kind of ask those for fear of offending me. But it was really important that, and like the chair was fantastic, because the first thing the chair did was say, Shahida, are you all right answering these questions? Would you feel comfortable answering these questions? So the fact that it was sense checked with me first was really important. And second thing was to be able to kind of explicitly say to people, it's okay, I'm not going to be offended if you ask me XYZ. But the most important bit that happened in that conversation, there was no assumption made that just because I was the person of colour on that board, therefore I should answer all the questions, no matter how comfortable or uncomfortable I was. The most important bit of that conversation was it was sense checked with me first. How do you feel about it? Are you going to be all right tackling these questions? What can we do to support you? And so what that enabled was a sense of empowerment for me that says, yeah, bring on the questions, no problem, I'm not going to be offended. But the confidence of myself in the chair and other board members to know that everybody knew it wasn't just my responsibility, everybody had a responsibility. And so therefore, it's really important. So when you're thinking about diversifying your board, be clear in its purpose, be clear in the purpose of why you are diversifying your board. And if you are thinking about bringing on people because of neurodiversity, if you're thinking about bringing people on any of the protected characteristics or any kind of diversity that you want, it could be around class, it could be around language, it doesn't matter what it is. Think about the support infrastructure around those trustees, especially if you are bringing them into a space where there is a question of power in the relationship. And if you're talking about creating an equitable, diverse board, then that means extra work into thinking about how you can create equity in the board, which is around making sure everybody has a say, that there's a set of values that are clearly outlined at the start of that meeting. We might differ in our views, but we will articulate those respectfully to each other, and those types of things. So when we're talking about how do we maintain one, it's about thinking how you really get into supporting your trustees and seeing your trustees not just collectively, but within their individual lived experiences as well, because there's so much more to a trustee than just kind of sitting there reading an agenda a minute and kind of rubber stamping stuff that you wish them to do. They can bring real depth and real richness to the work that you're trying to deliver. Get that right set of trustees on that board can really, really help you grow as well. So I hope that's kind of whistle-stop tour of some of the stuff that we do around helping organisations to diversify their board. I'm just really conscious that Jay has got a few minutes left, but if there's anything we can help or support on, you can catch us on our website.
Okay, thank you so much, Shada. Obviously, this is, this is just a very quick overview, but there's lots more. I know that you do some really good stuff around diversifying your board in a lot more depth. So when we do a follow-up, we'll send your details out. But thanks for joining us today. So we're nearly at the end, and we've got time for some questions, hopefully. So let me just move on. Yeah, some useful resources. I've just added these on, really useful. Charity Commission produce all sorts of great information, and we've started doing our own charity news as well. So if you're not, you should be on the database for that, but if not, let us know afterwards. Okay, so questions. So I noticed that there were questions on the chat. Some, I think, people have helpfully answered other people's questions. But Lindsay, do you want to take us through a few questions? And if anybody else wants to speak, you can unmute yourself and just speak, or if you want to raise your hand or indicate here, then you can do. Oh yeah, this is a slide about our trustee training. So just to let you know that Ellie, who is our lead, some of you will have already been trained by her. She's doing a brilliant job, and she's managed to get a big funding contribution through Skills Bank for some of our training, HR Essentials and trustee training. So this is actually for the trustee, for a board itself. But we are looking at putting on some delegate rates so that it's cheaper if you just wanted to send 1 or 2 trustees. So if you're interested in that, please let us know, and then Ellie will put together a programme with some dates and see what we can do there. Okay, so questions.
Okay, it's been really lovely to read the chats because you're all helping each other out, which is which has been really nice. So just key ones or themes that have come up. Resistance from boards in terms of bringing in set periods that we've seen that someone's just having difficulties where they've got long-standing boards who don't want caps on their term, and yeah, we've had lots of ideas just around that, particularly basically presenting to them a document. It's basically making it hard for them to say no, we don't agree with that. You've got to show everyone the benefits, and you've got to be able to justify why you want to do something. So it doesn't look like you're just on a vendetta to get rid of people, but I do think it's important that you do have those mechanisms to be able to bring in new skill sets to your board. And also everyone then should hopefully keeps them on the toes, and they realise that they need to contribute and they need to be active, or otherwise when it comes to the end of their term they may not be re-elected. So yeah, so there's been some good questions around that and some good suggestions. Another one that we've had is having staff trustees, so elected by staff. This can make challenging discussion. This can make things quite challenging discussing things like pay rewards and people risk. So yeah, I agree. I think that is a difficult one, and especially then if you've got people that may need to excuse themselves for conflict, if you're talking about pay. It's been suggested rather than have staff trustees, have staff reps who go and basically present to the board, as opposed to having actual voting rights. But I appreciate if you've already got those trustees in place, it's managing those conversations and being careful about what you're allowing people to vote on or to veto. So they're going down, just making sure I haven't missed anything.
Lindsay, I was just going to say,
Oh,
in
yep.
terms of sort of long-term trustees struggling to kind of step down, or if you're having governance issues, when we've done this work, what we've quite often found with trustees that have been there a long time, it's also a bit of an emotional journey. So it's that kind of emotional letting go in their head that it's okay, that if I step away as a charity, nothing, as a trustee, this isn't all going to fall in on the charity. And I think sometimes when we kind of wave governance documents in front of people, it hardens their position. So there is an element of kind of going through a bit of a journey with people. I know it sounds like a strange thing to say, but sometimes getting to the heart of what's holding a trustee back from actually leaving. And quite often, 9 out of 10 times, we find out that it's a fear of, well, if I step away, who's going to do the things that I was doing? And so being able to kind of reassure people, going, you know what, you've had a fantastic innings, you've contributed so much, it's absolutely okay for you to leave now. So there is something a little bit about also doing that kind of psychological journey bit as well. It doesn't have to be, kind of, but if you do get into that space where it is about governance, having, as you were saying earlier, Lindsay, having really good, strong governance structures and processes helps to make it easier.
No, thank you. I think really good comments, and I think I'm hoping we've touched on that quite a bit in terms of the softer side to this. So the one-to-ones, the making sure that you're involving everyone, you're treating everyone fairly. Trustees are people, and they're only involved in your charity because they're generally very invested in what you do. Not many people give up their time for free, for no benefit or gain themselves. So they're doing this because they want to help, and that's their gain and benefit. So it's tapping into, like you said, why do they want to do that? I'll have a look. Have we got any more questions? So yes, so we can send out a copy of the slides. What we normally do is we send out a feedback form. We kindly ask you to fill that in because we always want to hear what your thoughts are on the session, what you want to hear next. But at the bottom of that, there is the option then to say, can I have a copy of the slides? Click yes, we will send you a copy. But I think that is all the questions today. So thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you first of all to Jay, who took us through the trustee journey, and also very big thanks to Shahida today as well for her insight as well. I think it's been really valuable. Hope that you agree, and if you do want to follow up with anything you've seen today, please do get in touch with us. if you want to engage with the trustee training as well, do contact us and we can talk to you in more depth about that. Is there anything you want to add, Jay, before we close the session?
Just to say that, you know, we want to put things on that are of value to our existing clients as well as, you know, anybody out there really. And doing this session online, we had actually scheduled a session face to face and online, but then we just thought, let's just test it out online. And, you know, I think it's been quite good. But if people have any views on that, when we send the feedback, I'd really appreciate it if you can give me your views on what sort of topics you find valuable, what you think about the online versus, you know, face to face, and anything else you can think of. So we've not got our next one set up yet because we're just trying to keep our topics relevant. The first one was about equality and diversity, and this one's about trustees. So we'll start thinking about what other things we'd like to share with you. But yeah, if you can give us any feedback, I'd be grateful. And Lisa, hi Lisa, I haven't seen you since since our kids were at school. I haven't seen you for years.
Hi.
For a long time. But yeah, hybrid working. So I can send you some information about that. So that's something that we obviously do a lot in a different format in our HR exchange, because we work with not just charities but lots of organisations. And we've done something some good stuff around hybrid working and the problems with that and the best ways to manage that. So I can send that to you and anybody else. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, great to see everyone. So if you want to hang around and have a chat, then you're welcome to. But if you need to go and get some lunch or get back on with work. See, that's the downside of an online. You don't get a free lunch, which we would have put on. Okay. All right. Well, bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.